Infinite Evolution, starting with Captain America Serum. Chapter 61. Time passed silently, and 4 days vanished in a flash. It was September 8th, and Zola had already been in space for a full day. SHIELD still had no clue about Ava's whereabouts. Read Taiwanese novels on Chow Kaopu. At this time, Howard, with his superb technical disguise, had prevented the military and CIA from detecting any abnormality in the Ghost Lab. But it was only a matter of time before it was discovered. Josie no longer paid attention to these matters. With Ghost Ava in his hands, there was naturally no need to stay in Detroit. His time was very tight, and many plans had to be completed as soon as possible. How do you feel? Is there anywhere you're uncomfortable? Josie asked with concern. Not bad. Lena said excitedly and delightedly, my body feels very light, there's a slight bloating sensation, and I'm gradually adapting. Also, my skin is smoother, my muscles are firmer, and I feel more powerful than before. Indeed, no woman dislikes good skin. He hadn't paid much attention before, but the miniaturized battlesuit also had a beautifying effect. In short, it feels great. As she spoke, Lena's clear blue eyes sparkled with joy. After sweeping his psychic power over her once more to confirm that her body was fine, Josie imported the fixed parameters into the miniaturized battlesuit system. Looking at the girl, who was now a size smaller than before, he reminded her again, I've already set up the battlesuit parameters and various modes. Now you need to familiarize yourself with them. Got it, sir, you're so good to me. The petite Lena, barely 1.6 meters tall, hugged his arm with a bright smile, her eyes full of affection and joy. During these 10+ days in Detroit, besides tracking down Ghost, Josie also took the time to use the experimental equipment he carried with him to create a customized miniaturized battlesuit for her. The crimson bionic material transformed into a flowing flame, coiling around the girl's body, complementing her jade-like skin. It was as if white jade was draped in a layer of rosy light, extraordinarily captivating and alluring. All right, quickly put your clothes on. Pack your things, get ready to leave. With strong steel will, Josie forced himself to look away and return to the room to pack his things. Half an hour later, both of them were ready. The most time-consuming part was clearing any biological information related to themselves in the apartment, to prevent it from being taken for research. Fortunately, with Josie's psychic power, cleaning was convenient and left no residue. The two came downstairs, ready to drive out of the city. They hadn't driven far when a commotion, mixed with clanging and crashing, came from the distance. It's these guys again. Josie looked up, his gaze passing over the GG sign at the street corner, and saw a dense crowd filling the street several hundred meters ahead. Large groups of black people held up banners and signs, completely blocking the entire street. These guys were brandishing iron rods, wine bottles, and various sprays, smashing and spraying vehicles and shop windows along the street, with the sound of breaking glass and car alarms rising and falling. Police sirens echoed throughout the entire district. Scattered police officers tried to maintain order but were completely unable to suppress the surging crowd. Careless officers were instead chased and beaten by the rioters, and the scene was chaotic. Detroit's old problem has flared up again, Josie mused, a hint of schadenfreude in his tone. This kind of beautiful spectacle can only be enjoyed in America. It seems it won't calm down for a while, so let's take another route. He opened his self-made car navigation and checked other routes out of the city. However, he found that today's protests and demonstrations seemed unusually widespread. Small-scale riots and conflicts had appeared in almost 6 or 7 blocks centered around them. The vehicle slowly drove through AT Junction, where the road ahead was again blocked by the police, who were erecting thick armored barriers. The city news was continuously broadcasting. Riots have blocked multiple main roads. The government urges citizens to stay home or in basements as much as possible and avoid going out. This is quite interesting. Looking at the closed road sections marked in red on the map, a mysterious expression appeared on Josie's face. Sir, something seems wrong. Lena looked around vigilantly. 500 or 600 meters ahead, a dozen construction vehicles and 7 or 8 police cars sped towards them. Large numbers of metal fences and movable barriers were quickly erected in the middle of the road, forming a temporary blockade. Riot police threw smoke grenades and formed a human wall with riot shields, pushing back against the rioters ahead. Haha, it is indeed not right. Zhou Zi's eyes were deep as he stared at the rows of unusually thick, 10-meter-high metal fences. Don't you think these things are a bit overkill for dealing with protesting rioters? The sirens at the street corner and the roar of the crowd intertwined. The air in Detroit was heavier than usual, even the wind carried a sense of anxiety. Just then, a faint sense of danger suddenly exploded behind Zhou Zi's head. In an instant, his psychic power spread over 100 meters, enveloping everything around him. His super senses operated at full power, capturing information disturbances within hundreds of meters, sifting through them for factors that posed a threat to him. Suddenly, a subtle afterimage streaked across his sensory field. Puff! The car window shattered with a bang. Countless glass fragments, centered around a black dot, flew outwards at high speed. A thumb-thick, sharp bullet tore through the air, carrying unparalleled extreme speed and lethality, heading straight for Zhou Zi's temple. 1,300 meters away. The sniper's lips curled into a wild grin. The moment he pulled the trigger, he had already foreseen the fate of his prey. The shocking scene of brains bursting and flesh and bone spraying, he had witnessed it hundreds of times. With this terrifying sniper shot, any living creature had only one path: death. Every bullet had to take a life. This time, it was no exception. This so-called X-17, with a bounty as high as $8 million, would add another glorious stroke to his illustrious record. His name would rank among the top in both the assassin world and among mercenaries. It was just that the employer's request was a bit strange. They required him to make the kill from over 1,000 meters away, otherwise, even if the target was killed, the bounty would only be 1/10 of the original amount. But as long as the money was in place, nothing was a problem. In less than a second, various complex thoughts surged through the sniper's mind. Target eliminated. Bang. The unnamed assassin was about to inform his teammates to go to the scene and retrieve the goods. The big client had personally instructed, ensure the target is dead, and the body must be brought back. But the words had just squeezed out of his throat, before he could finish. A piercing bang suddenly echoed through the communication channel. The assassin would never speak his last words. PFF'd. Blood gushed violently from the sniper's neck, spraying several meters away, and the air was filled with the sweet, metallic scent of rust and a burnt smell. He froze in place, a fist-sized hole conspicuously present in his throat. Through the hole, one could directly see the clear blue sky behind him. In the depths of the assassin's lifeless pupils, a blurry afterimage was reflected for the last time. 1,000 meters away, Zhou Zi stood outside the car, his arms slightly raised, pointing distantly towards his own position. A translucent ripple extended over 1,000 meters through the air, piercing straight through the gradually lifeless body. Thud. The cervical spine shattered, bone fragments scattering. The remaining skin and flesh of the assassin's neck could no longer support the weight of his head, which wobbled and then rolled to the edge of the low wall. A gust of wind blew, and the head tumbled down the high-rise building. Almost simultaneously, his teammates' questions and curses echoed through the communication channel. Walker, what the hell are you talking about? A gruff voice cursed. Kill failed. The target is fine, there's no one in the car. Quickly reconfirm the position. Garcia, cover. When did he get out of the car? Another sniper named Garcia quickly responded. Garcia received. Target reconfirmed. Currently. His voice abruptly cut off. His pupils suddenly contracted, a chill running up his spine to the back of his neck, and he exclaimed, the target seems to be looking at me. Oh. He's really looking this way. My God. PFF'd. A low, cracking sound was heard, and Garcia's channel only transmitted the sound of a heavy object falling. What's going on? What the hell is happening? Walker, Garcia, answer immediately. His teammates called out repeatedly but received no response. Everyone felt a shiver down their spines. Until a woman's trembling voice sounded in the channel. Walker is dead. He was counter-sniped by the target. Garcia is dead too. The target isn't an ordinary person at all. He just blocked a sniper bullet with his bare hands. This is definitely a biological weapon modified by the military. Run. This is an experiment, we've been tricked. The woman's scream exploded in the ears of every team member. She was the team's electronic warfare and intelligence expert, and she had witnessed that incredible scene firsthand. When Walker fired, she captured Josie's movements through a high-speed camera. She clearly saw that after the car window shattered, that terrifying man, with incredible speed, directly used his fingers to block the specially made sniper bullet, which was powerful enough to penetrate an armored vehicle. Then, in less than 0.1 seconds, the man immediately locked onto Walker's position and shot him dead with his bare hands. Yes, he unleashed an electromagnetic cannon-like strike with his bare hands. The team members listened to the woman's narration, and the communication channel fell into a momentary silence. Then it erupted into complete chaos. On the other side, Josie, outside the car, looked down at his fingertips. There was an extremely tiny red dot there, gradually fading, until it completely recovered after half a breath. That was close, I almost messed up. He exhaled lightly, his tone indifferent with a hint of coldness. His gaze pierced through the air, staring at the two tall buildings over 1,000 meters away. In his perception, the two life magnetic fields there were rapidly dissipating, marking the positions of the two snipers. This distance exceeded his usual perception range. Moreover, this group of assassins was extremely professionally trained. They didn't directly search for him but instead ambushed him along his inevitable route. Once the target entered their sniper sight, the snipers would pull the trigger simultaneously. The interval between the killing intent signal and the sniper's action was less than half a second. This special assassination method almost allowed them to succeed. Of course, with Josie's defense, even if he were hit, it wouldn't cause much damage. But it was indeed one of the few ways to touch him. Unfortunately, this group of elites, who were considered top tier among ordinary people, were merely tools pushed out to test him. Ignoring the cannon fodder who were already terrified, Josie's attention fell on the street behind him. Hundreds of meters away, dozens of infantry fighting vehicles and heavy tanks sped towards them. Steel tracks rolled over the old asphalt road, leaving behind cracks and gravel, directly crushing the private cars on the roadside into piles of scrap metal. At the same time, in a city park 100 meters to the east, in two four-story abandoned buildings on the north and south sides, hundreds of heavily armed elite forces converged from all directions. In the blink of an eye, the once bustling parade street was cleared, leaving only the rumbling steel army approaching. The huge commotion attracted the curiosity of residents along the street, followed by immense panic and chaos. Seeing this, the protesting black crowd stood stunned for less than a second, then, as if they had seen devils, they screamed and flailed their arms, fleeing in all directions. Hundreds of people, like a flock of sheep chased by wolves, all wished they had two more legs. Hydra is really going all out this time. His telekinesis swept over the armored vehicles, and Josie became alert. He looked at Lena, who was standing by, and quickly instructed, "When we engage later, find an opportunity to leave here." Lena was startled by his words and immediately refused. "Sir, what are you trying to do? If we're leaving, we leave together. I will never let you face danger alone." Battle intent surged from the girl, and she looked at the approaching enemies in the distance, her eyes radiating killing intent. She took out her power armor from inside the car and began to put it on, her miniature battlesuit rapidly unfolding over her body. "All right, don't you understand me yet?" Josie stopped her, looking relaxed and at ease, without the slightest hint of panic from being encircled. "These guys can't stop me at all. I just want to see what Hydra can really bring out, to scout out the situation first. That way, when we go to Sokovia after taking care of business, we'll have a contingency plan in advance." With that, he pulled out a miniature ray gun and handed it to Lena, continuing to instruct, "Besides, you don't have no mission. Those guys who attacked us earlier probably haven't gone far yet. Go catch them, let's see who finishes off their enemies first." Lena was not ungrateful. On the contrary, she was very smart. Almost instantly, she understood Josie's intention. Sir was protecting her. Although she had never seen Josie's true full power, based on her previous understanding, these enemies in front of them indeed posed little threat to him. Moreover, Josie also had his miniature battlesuit. Yesterday, she had personally experienced the flying speed comparable to a hypersonic missile. Unless he encountered a large-scale nuclear explosion, there was almost no weapon on Earth that could threaten him. Even a nuclear bomb probably couldn't kill Josie. In reality, Josie did have the intention of protecting her, but not much. With Lena's strength, he didn't need to worry about her at all. Her three-dimensional attributes surpassing Captain America's, her psychic charm superpower, combined with the miniature battlesuit and power armor. Even if he didn't intervene, Lena alone would be enough to sweep away the enemies in front of them. On one hand, he didn't want to expose the PIM technology he possessed too early. At least, he would only consider publicly using it after the infinite furnace completed the refining of PIM particles and he fully mastered the power of shrinking and growing at will. Although Hydra probably already knew about this. But at least he had to act as if he didn't know that they already knew about his abilities, to slightly confuse the opponent. On the other hand, he had found some interesting things in the armored car and wanted to use this opportunity to test his true strength. Looking at the constantly approaching armed forces, Josie suddenly thought of another matter. He was being encircled here. Would Howard and the others at the Ghost Laboratory also be attacked? Forget it, let Lena go check. He thought for a moment and decided he should confirm it. That's my financial security and talent pool in the Marvel world, it can't go wrong so quickly. Under the cover of his telekinesis, Lena quickly put on her power armor, then activated her miniature battlesuit to cover it, instantly shrinking herself to the size of an ant. At the same time, he informed her of the mission to scout the Ghost Laboratory. After you deal with those mercenaries, make a detour to the Ghost Laboratory and check on the situation there. Lena had been with Josie for a long time and was already familiar with his way of thinking. Sir, are you worried that S.H.I.E.L.D. is also being encircled? They are our allies after all. If something happens, we should always lend a hand. Josie said, putting on his power armor, a cunning expression on his face. Besides, S.H.I.E.L.D. and Stark Industries have quite a substantial fortune. He chuckled softly, it's a good opportunity to have them support Sokovia's national construction. Why not? By then, if I can't make it, you'll have to handle the situation yourself. Josie pondered for a moment, giving his guess, if Howard is truly being encircled by Hydra, they probably won't be able to hold out. This made Lena show some surprise. She still remembered the last time they traded with S.H.I.E.L.D. With just 3 armored vehicles, they had managed to break through Hydra's blockade of over 100 people. Although they had intervened during that time, the combat power they displayed was not to be underestimated. This time, attacking the Ghost Laboratory. S.H.I.E.L.D. brought a considerable amount of advanced equipment and personnel, at least 20 sets of mechanical exoskeletons, which was clearly Howard's work recently. With such a lineup, Josie actually thought they couldn't hold out. It seemed Hydra really had something up their sleeve this time. Alright, hurry up and leave. But also be careful, if there's a problem, retreat quickly, don't try to be a hero. Finally, Josie instructed. Understood, sir, don't worry. Tens of kilometers away, at the temporary Hydra command post. In the monitoring hall, a giant tactical screen flickered with light and shadows, and 3 people were intently staring at the display. The middle-aged man in the center wore a sharp, tailored black uniform, with the Hydra emblem faintly visible on his collar, and his fingers were clearly defined by black leather gloves. 2 dark red scars on the man's left cheek slashed diagonally from his brow bone to his jaw, like the fangs of a venomous snake, lurking motionless in the reflection behind the glass. If Josie were present, he would recognize him at a glance. This person was Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, from the California First Research Institute, who Josie had met once before when Strucker tried to recruit him into Hydra. Strucker's silver hair was impeccably combed, and his cold gaze was fixed on Josie in the image, a flicker of greed passing through his eyes. This Hydra leader, who originally commanded from Europe, had personally come to Detroit to pursue him. Beside the Baron were 2 others, Mitchell Carson, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Defense Department, and Lieutenant General Willie Davidson, a 3-star general in the U.S. Army. Today, they had gathered here, mobilizing a large number of troops and armored vehicles, all for one person. X-17, Josie, the out-of-control experimental subject who escaped from the California research facility. After half a year of meticulous preparation, the deeply entrenched German noble baron had created even more powerful biochemical weapons. Today, he was determined to wash away the previous disgrace with the blood of X-17. General Davidson, Director Mitchell. Strucker turned, his gaze sweeping over the two like a blade, his voice deep and hoarse, with a strong German accent. From the feedback of the Black Star mercenaries, it seems that X-17, in addition to physical enhancements, has also undergone some kind of mutation on a mental level. His tone rose slightly. Our technical personnel analyzed X-17's micro-expressions during the attack. They deduced that at the moment he was targeted, with almost no time interval, approximately 0.51 millisecond, he exhibited evasive tendencies, which appear to be an instinctive pre-warning. This is very likely some form of psychic perception or accelerated reaction ability. Otherwise, he couldn't have dodged that special sniper bullet, which travels at 5 times the speed of sound. This is another significant discovery. At this point, a fervent, fanatical light ignited in the eyes of the German nobleman, his tone almost taking on a religious chant. Dual evolution of body and mind. The research value of X-17 is truly immeasurable. Once successfully replicated, the advent of Hydra's order will be unstoppable. And we will. Baron, this is not in line with the original plan, Mitchell Carson reminded coldly, looking at the somewhat frenzied Strucker. Dr. Zola warned long ago that X-17 is extremely dangerous and must be destroyed on sight. Zola. Strucker's speech was interrupted, and his expression immediately turned sinister. He stared at Mitchell expressionlessly, and asked coldly, if Zola is correct, why did you give me command, and he himself is hiding in some rat hole? And that Alexander Pierce, saying that Howard Stark is the real threat and needs to be eliminated first. HMPH, you lot are nothing but a bunch of cowards. How can the rise of order be without any risk whatsoever? Mitchell's face was extremely grim after such a merciless reprimand. You, be careful not to play with fire. With a cold snort, he turned abruptly and slammed the door shut, leaving. Without the support of Dr. Zola and Pierce, he was temporarily powerless to openly confront Strucker, but thinking of the subsequent plan, a cold smile involuntarily appeared at the corner of Mitchell's mouth. Go ahead and gloat now, you pathetic fool. Strucker's expression was stern, his gaze fixed on the familiar figure on the screen before him. With no annoying people to interfere, and Davidson being his direct subordinate. Today, he was going to capture X-17 alive and avenge his previous humiliation. Very good. Strucker raised his hand slightly, his tone calm and icy. Davidson, all units advance. All operations began to proceed in an orderly manner. Looking at the enemy forces almost within reach, Josie's expression gradually became serious, his eyes sharp. Even a lion uses its full strength to hunt a rabbit. No matter the strength of the opponent, one must never let down their guard. In an instant, Josie's aura sharply intensified. His psychic power expanded, condensing within a 3-jong radius around him, his information gathering range compressed to 100 meters, and his super brain operated at full capacity, his thoughts, reactions, and perceptions simultaneously climbing to their peak. He silently surveyed his surroundings, maintaining the most perfect defensive posture for the current stage. In fact, he had already detected Hydra's deployment the moment before the attack erupted. From the public demonstration to the Black Riot, then to the street blockade and heavy firepower ambush, everything was progressing in an orderly fashion. They deliberately led him into this district, turning the entire urban area into a hunting ground, solely to trap and kill him. Josie's informational vision was comparable to a super radar, allowing him to clearly distinguish the anomalies of the group of Hydra soldiers over 100 meters away. These individuals were completely different from typical special forces. Every member was exceptionally tall and robust, almost none shorter than 1.8 meters. Their entire bodies were encased in a layer of sub-black combat suits, internally padded with high-performance ceramic steel plates and shear thickening fluid, forming an ultimate protective system that covered every inch of their skin. Even their heads and faces were sealed by metal helmets. Beneath the dark red visors were pairs of cold, dead eyes. There was no emotional fluctuation, their breathing rhythm was eerily consistent, and even their pupils did not waver, like mechanically driven corpses, approaching step by step. These were definitely Hydra fanatics, mentally reshaped and chemically enhanced. A faint aura of enhancement, along with a strong scent of death, emanated from them. These soldiers were essentially disposable. What surprised Josie even more was that Among these individuals, there were more than 20 exceptionally robust, special individuals, each about 2.3 meters tall. They did not appear to be pure humans. Because in the crimson eyes of these individuals, strings of flowing digital code flickered, and beneath their skin were complex circuit and mechanical structures. Battle commands were transmitted from the biological chips in the brains of the 20 special individuals to the minds of the surrounding ordinary soldiers, forming a combat area network. Hundreds of Hydra soldiers had their brains modified. All were controlled by Hydra's central combat system from the rear. Cybernetics, cyborgs. Josie's pupils flashed with silver light, and he grew excited. HMPH. As expected of Hydra, 20 years ahead of the world in technology, they've even developed cybernetics. But then again, the Winter Soldier's metal arm is powered by a miniature nuclear reactor. That thing is a genuine cybernetic machine. Since that's the case, I hope you can give me a surprise. And the opponent did not disappoint him. The moment Josie moved, the combat system, which was constantly monitoring him, immediately issued an order. Attack. 100 meters away, Hydra soldiers raised their clearly modified, large-caliber firearms. Bang bang bang. A violent buzzing sound simultaneously erupted from all directions. Thousands of 20mm rounds, comparable to miniature grenades, rained down densely on Josie in the middle of the road. An assault of this magnitude was enough to completely shred a several-meter-thick concrete fortification or a heavy armored vehicle in a few seconds. Josie, at the center of the attack, had already reacted a step ahead. He reached out, grabbed a nearby vehicle, his 5 fingers embedding into the metal car body like iron tongs, and then lifted the entire car high into the air. With a slight swing of his arm, the multi-ton object was wielded like a toy. It formed an iron wall defense, 2 meters thick, around Josie, enough to deter any attack. However, these bullets were not just large in appearance. The moment the bullets struck the vehicle, the concentrated explosives hidden inside suddenly ignited, instantly transforming into miniature grenades that exploded with a roar. Rumble rumble rumble. Blazing flames shot into the sky. A series of explosions shook the street, and fire and shockwaves spread across the entire city. The reverberations lasted for a full minute. Only when the ammunition in the Hydra soldiers' guns was depleted did this round of assault finally pause briefly. Inside the Combat Command Center, Strucker stared intently at the monitoring screen, trying to discern a clue from the churning smoke and dust. Just then, an analyst exclaimed, "Baron, abnormal airflow fluctuations detected at the point of attack. It's X-17. Whoosh." At the center of the thick smoke, a whirlwind inexplicably arose, revealing the figure within. The street, ravaged by high explosives, was already unrecognizable. Asphalt and gravel splattered everywhere, and the thick road surface was peeled back more than a dozen centimeters, exposing the moist soil beneath. And what was chilling was, within a 1-meter radius of Josie, the road remained completely unscathed, still retaining its original appearance. Flames, smoke, shattered bullet casings, and rocks were all unable to fall into that area. It was as if some invisible force enveloped it, completely isolating it and turning it into a forbidden zone. Within the forbidden zone, the car in Josie's hand had already turned into a pile of metal shavings, scattered at his feet. A wisp of fire extinguished from his fist, revealing a faint red mark, but it faded in the blink of an eye, restoring his fist to its flawless, jade-like state. How is this possible? The combat analyst's eyes bulged, his face filled with disbelief. As Baron Strucker's confidant, he had also browsed all the data on X-17, knowing that it was a more formidable bio-engineered superhuman than Captain America. For this, they had specifically designed various weapons and countermeasures. Just like the high-explosive bullets earlier, the composite explosive within them had more than 15 times the power of TNT, capable of generating widespread high temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius after detonation. Even a 50-centimeter thick steel plate could be melted into molten iron. But now, after a round of firepower, it couldn't even shake X-17's defenses, let alone get close. This completely subverted his understanding of science and biology. You're telling me this is a product of the super soldier serum? What a joke. Isn't this foolish Kryptonian Superman from the comics coming to Earth? Or is X-17 an alien hiding on Earth? Confused thoughts flashed through his mind. But the analyst didn't delay, immediately activating the next capture plan. On the battlefield, Josie felt his blood slightly boiling. A glimmer of excitement surged in his eyes, and he muttered in a low voice, "Warm up over, main course begins." The next moment, a fierce wind suddenly rose. On the empty street, a straight afterimage suddenly streaked out. Josie's figure flashed, instantly covering over Tenjong, like a black lightning bolt, actively rushing towards the armored vehicle array. Wherever he passed, stone fragments flew and the wind howled. Hydra's combat system captured his movements. At the same time, hundreds of enhanced soldiers reacted, quickly switching combat modes. Behavior pattern prediction complete, switching to E3 attack route. Mechanical Serpent King, fully surround X-17. Fire high explosive shells. Activate sonic compression array. Initiate airspace suppression, high energy laser network covering marked area. Restraint cannon trajectory projection, gel liquid spray. Clearly, to deal with Josie, Baron Strucker had gone to great lengths, developing various weapons specifically for him, which indeed had some impact on him. Almost simultaneously, the battle entered a white-hot phase. The distance between the two sides was only 100 meters, a distance Josie could cover in 2 seconds at his speed. But just as he took a step and closed in on the enemy to 40 meters, a warning blared in his mind. Dozens of crimson light pillars, as thick as an adult's wrist, suddenly descended from the sky, plummeting like light swords, striking directly downwards, giving Josie no time to react. That was light speed attack. Even with his speed, it was difficult to completely dodge. Along with the light pillars, an invisible shockwave also descended. The air around him vibrated rapidly, wrinkling into wave-like patterns. The ground beneath his feet seemed to suffer a massive hammer blow, visibly indenting several inches and cracking into a web-like pattern. Josie felt his entire body enveloped by an invisible liquid membrane, as if immense pressure was trying to crush his body. High-energy laser, ultrasonic weapon. He immediately identified the type of attack, but he could no longer completely evade it. The extreme sonic barrier caused his leaping figure to pause, allowing him to barely leap out of the central attack range before the danger fully arrived. Within 0.1 milliseconds, thousands of degrees Celsius of high-energy laser had already made intimate contact with his body. His clothes instantly ignited, and the struck skin became slightly red and swollen, a tingling and warmth intermingling, giving him the illusion of undergoing traditional Chinese moxibustion. A crimson light pillar grazed his forehead, cutting off a few strands of hair. Immediately after, before he could catch his breath from the laser attack, a new threat surged towards him. Cyber Hydra moved out. More than 10 massive behemoths leapt out from behind the armored vehicles, their steps heavy yet extremely swift, with faint blue exhaust flames spewing from their backs, covering 10 meters in a single stride, quickly surrounding him. These bio-weapons, known as Mechanical Serpent Kings, were as agile as Josie's normal jogging speed. As they ran, their chests, shoulders, and abdomens rapidly shifted, extending 6 strange, thick metal rods from within, with brilliant electric arcs flowing over them. At the same time, the armored vehicles behind opened their muzzles, spraying out sticky white liquid and silver-white metal nets. In the command center, Baron Strucker watched Josie, heavily surrounded on the screen, a cruel smile playing on his lips. To deal with X-17, he had truly pulled out all the stops. He had brought out all his assets, spending hundreds of millions of dollars and countless researchers' half-year efforts, all culminating in this hunting operation. High explosives, high-energy lasers, sonic arrays, super gel, vibranium restraint nets. Plus the steel-constructed Mechanical Serpent Kings, and the hundreds of Cyber Hydra soldiers comparable to enhanced humans. At this moment, it was an inescapable net. He refused to believe that X-17 could escape such a siege alive. In front of the monitoring screens, the Hydra commanders and others also stared motionlessly at the prey in the picture. They had already begun to calculate how to win the Baron's appreciation afterwards, and obtain a cell sample of X-17 to carry out the experiments they had long envisioned. To most people, Josie's defeat was already a foregone conclusion. No matter how abnormal X-17 was, as long as he was a biological entity, he could never contend with the wisdom of steel technology. The situation on site also seemed to confirm this. Dense ultrasonic arrays vibrated frantically at millisecond frequencies, forming a several meter thick, shifting sound wall that continuously suppressed and restricted Josie's movements. The moment he was simultaneously restrained by the light swords and sound wall. More than 10 black spheres suddenly exploded above his head and around him. Buzz. Poof. A violent boom entered his ears, then instantly ceased. Immediately, he felt a tightness in his chest, the air was rapidly compressed, and a layer of mist even condensed on his skin, only to be evaporated by the high temperature in an instant. Laser array, ultrasonic suppression, air compression bombs. Facing such terrifying attacks, Josie's expression remained calm, his emotions undisturbed, and even the frequency of his heartbeat remained unchanged. In this current mode, then next. Silver light flowed deep in his pupils, and his supercomputer brain reached a conclusion within 0.1 seconds. It's a combination of infrasound standing waves and high-energy lasers, superimposing a super high-temperature beam of tens of thousands of degrees through acoustic-optic synergistic effects. A good plan, it indeed has a 3% chance of causing me a slight injury. Unfortunately, I've already tried it. As expected. As soon as the high-density air formed, the infrasound and light pillars had already arrived. The air was directly ignited, and the red-hot flames, turning white, made one feel as if they were in a steelmaking furnace at thousands of degrees Celsius. The crimson energy network firmly locked onto Josie. The originally dispersed laser energy, guided by the infrasound, completely combined and focused, cutting streaks of blood into Josie's skin. Seeing this scene, the Hydra members in front of the monitoring station were so excited they almost cried. Finally. This monster was finally injured. This scene provided the greatest comfort to countless Hydra researchers working diligently in the laboratories. He was not invincible, he could still be hurt. Everyone's efforts were not in vain. Almost at the same time, the second wave of attacks came rushing in. Super gel, sprayed from all directions, fell from high altitude and directly plunged into the laser fire net, adhering to Josie's entire body like viscous liquid chocolate. In an instant, he was enveloped into an irregular white sphere. Immediately after, 5 or 6 sets of vibranium restraint nets fell, precisely embedding themselves within the gel layer, connecting and intertwining to form 3 or 4 layers of circular cages. The special gel rapidly contracted and solidified in the high temperature. In less than 2 seconds, it formed a composite cage capable of withstanding missile bombardment, its density skyrocketing to metallic firmness, with a strength comparable to the same volume of tungsten steel alloy. Read Taiwan's good book selection, it's awesome. This was just the beginning. As the gel completely solidified, an internal chemical reaction was initiated, releasing a colorless, odorless, high-strength neuroparalytic gas. Just 1 gram could knock out a blue whale. Even a super soldier couldn't last 5 seconds. This was a chemical weapon Hydra had specially prepared for Josie. 10 seconds later, 3 Cyber Hydra soldiers stepped forward. The electromagnetic coils on their chests flickered with dazzling blue light, and energy surged down their armguards, transforming into blazing humanoid high-voltage electromagnetic rods that directly pierced into the gel. In an instant, electric arcs intertwined, crackling. The air was instantly ionized into a ghostly blue curtain of light, enveloping the entire hemisphere in a dazzling electromagnetic sphere. Each discharge released enough energy to melt steel and carbonize a person. Metal fragments on the ground constantly trembled, subtly drawn towards the light sphere, like a collapsing magnetic storm vortex. In the Hydra monitoring command room in the distance, the atmosphere suddenly erupted. Core temperature has risen to the critical point, the super gel has completely sealed, the target is completely locked down. We succeeded. He's dead. Cheers rose and fell in the control room. The commander excitedly turned to Baron Strucker. Baron, the target is unresponsive, can we begin recovery? Strucker's expression was stern, and he ordered in a deep voice, continue to release gel, strengthen the confinement, never underestimate this monster. Although he had always wanted to capture X-17 alive, he knew the opponent's terror ran deep, far from comparable to an ordinary super soldier. Especially after reading Dr. Zola's speculative report, he could not afford to be careless. Any oversight would lead to his failure. On the battlefield, the armored train's cannons continued to fire. New layers of gel fell in clumps, covering the existing sphere, constantly solidifying, contracting, and tightening in the laser's high temperature, ensuring not a single gap remained. Until 1 minute later. Under the pouring of 6 or 7 waves of super gel, a 3-meter diameter semicircular cage was fully formed, layer upon layer like a giant white jade, reflecting an eerie light. At this moment, seeing the target still silent, the expressions of the Hydra personnel gradually relaxed. Zhou Zi, in their eyes at this moment, was like a fly encased in amber, unable to escape Hydra's grasp. The commander stared at the monitor screen, relieved. Target completely still, recovery can begin. Before he finished speaking, the giant solidified sphere suddenly shook. What was that sound? The next second, invisible psychic threads swept across, and a straight, smooth crack appeared in the middle of the hemisphere, accompanied by a crunch, crunch sound. The gel cage split in two, completely breaking apart. Warning. Unknown energy fluctuations detected, electromagnetic barrier about to fail. Alarms blared. Strucker's face changed drastically, and he suddenly stood up, roaring. Immediately fire the high-voltage electric guns, increase the power of the infrasound and laser arrays, quick. Unfortunately, everything was already too late. In the center of the street, Zhou Zi's face was almost indiscernible within the laser grid, only a figure swaying in the blazing flames could be seen. From the start of the battle, to being trapped by them, and then breaking free again. The entire process took less than 2 minutes. Super gel continued to fall, and the sound wave and laser arrays operated at full power, attempting to completely cover the figure swallowed by the electromagnetic cage. The remaining dozen Cyber Hydra soldiers approached with heavy steps, currents surging around their bodies, seemingly about to form an encirclement. Hiss. A low, hurried sucking sound suddenly rang out. The dazzling high-energy beams suddenly dimmed, and a distorted vortex abruptly appeared within the nearly 10,000-degree blazing flames. The next instant, like a giant dragon roaring, it shook the entire street. Who? A visible impact wave, centered on the figure in the lightning and flames, rapidly expanded outwards. Wherever it passed, dust and gravel were swept into the sky, creating a terrifying momentum. The extreme wind pressure pushed the Cyber Hydra soldiers back several meters, plowing deep furrows in the ground. The white gel and vibranium restraint nets flying from high altitude also rolled back like feathers. The impact wave spread rapidly. The laser drones hidden hundreds of meters high disintegrated in an instant under ultra-high-speed vibrations comparable to an 8-level hurricane, turning into burning fragments falling to the ground. As the firelight dissipated, Zhou Zi's figure was revealed. Amidst the interplay of light and shadow, his body suddenly grew to 3 meters, with faint red steam rising from his body surface. Silver-white vibranium chains were embedded in his crimson, jade-like muscular arms, outlining eerie flesh patterns, exceptionally domineering and ferocious. Who? So comfortable. It's like a sauna. I haven't felt this in a long time. Zhou Zi gently twisted his neck, immediately producing a series of crackling sounds like firecrackers. HYDRA's series of powerful offensives allowed him to experience a long-lost comprehensive package of Chinese medicine moxibustion, guasha, electrotherapy massage, and sauna hot springs. It was quite comfortable. If they hadn't sealed him with that tofu gel, he would have been too lazy to move. Why didn't he discover this before? The combination of high-energy lasers, sound wave arrays, and ultra-high-pressure electricity actually created a perfect physical therapy of Chinese medicine moxibustion plus sound wave massage plus pulsed electrotherapy. It was simply a super soldier version of high-tech health care. Hydra probably entered the wrong profession. World domination was not for them. Medical wellness might be their true calling. It's time to give them a suggestion. Thump, thump, thump. Thump thump thump. Zhou Zi's heart began to beat rapidly. A drum-like thrum vibrated in the air, drilling into a Cyber Hydra soldier under his feet, and that Cyber Hydra soldier immediately burst into a series of sparks, decisively becoming scrap. He took a step forward. Puff. The asphalt road instantly collapsed, half of his calf sinking into the ground. After returning to his original physique, his mass had exceeded 1,300 kilograms, and with the PIM particles amplification, his mass directly surged to 10,000 kilograms. 10 tons. Comparable to the weight of an adult African elephant. Ordinary city ground simply couldn't withstand his every move, concrete ground was as fragile as tofu to him. However, activating this form consumed a considerable amount of his physical energy. Josie silently calculated in his mind. With my current physique, without changing volume, I can support a maximum of 35 times mass amplification, which is a 50-ton form, but I estimate I would be completely exhausted in an hour. But in the 10-ton state, it can last for over 3 hours. Strength, defense, and speed will all increase exponentially. He gently clenched his fist, and a series of crackles emanated from his palm. Roughly calculated, the grip strength of my physical body alone should exceed 50 tons, and single arm strength reaches 250 tons. What a wonderful feeling. Josie raised his head, his gaze sweeping over a group of Hydra soldiers 50 meters away. I happen to have a skill I've been conceiving for a long time. A graceful arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. I'll use you all to test it out. It can also be considered not to disappoint Baron Strucker's intentions. The next moment, Hydra witnessed the most horrifying scene of their lives. The giant raised his arm, extending it horizontally to 180 degrees, his left leg slightly bent, and his right leg stepped back half a pace. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. Josie's heart beat violently at a frequency of hundreds of times per minute. All his muscles merged into one under the control of his will, and cellular energy burned to its limit. Nearly 700 tons of physical body strength surged and circulated through his legs and spine, converging into his arm muscles. His supercomputer brain operated at its limit. All his psychic energy was finely divided into hundreds of thousands, millions of parts, intertwining and fusion into every strand of muscle and bone. At this moment, his strength increased by tens to hundreds of times, wildly climbing and surging. Faint white ripples appeared at the edges of his palms. Then, at a speed exceeding 5 times the speed of sound, they slammed shut. Boom. In an instant, the air in front was forcibly compressed into a translucent impact wave, and a huge white chi wave surged outwards from Josie as its center. The road surface peeled back layer by layer, and stones spun like leaves. Dust churned like a dragon, rising into the sky. Countless shattered stones and earth transformed into a raging, earthy yellow sea wave, crashing down upon the Cyber Hydra soldiers who had not yet had time to react. And then, crushing them fiercely. The mud sea wave wildly tumbled, continuing to surge towards the armored vehicles not far away, arriving in a breath. Tens of thousands of cubic meters of earth and stone covered them, burying them all in an instant. With one strike, Hydra's army was completely annihilated, like dry weeds and rotten wood. The Hydra command room was silent. Everyone, including Baron Strucker, stared blankly at the battle screen, their expressions frozen in shock. Was the scene before them an illusion? Countless chaotic and insane thoughts surged through the minds of these Hydra members, all of whom held at least doctorates. Absurd, ridiculous, a miracle, a devil. How was it possible? They couldn't imagine it, much less accept it. Their brains felt rusted shut, almost unable to function, refusing to comprehend what they were witnessing. From a high-altitude view, the center of the battlefield was a mess. With Josie at the epicenter, all buildings and the ground in a fan-shaped area nearly 100 meters in front of him were utterly destroyed and blown away. The half-meter-thick asphalt road, along with the soil beneath, seemed to have been scraped away by an invisible giant shovel. The entire street was as fragile as a sand sculpture. Where the translucent shockwave passed, debris rolled back in a fan-shaped trajectory, shattering into a gray-black rain of fragments in the air, scattering hundreds of meters away. Such a scene was only witnessed by the crowd on the battlefields of the Middle East. The Hydra officers present, with just a rough glance, estimated the TNT equivalent of this attack. At least 100 tons. The power of that single palm strike was almost equivalent to the simultaneous explosion of dozens of American Tomahawk-class conventional warheads on the ground. Perhaps even stronger. Even 50 missiles exploding simultaneously might not match the tearing force of that moment. A radius of hundreds of meters, the entire street was completely flattened. X-17. That was simply a walking miniature nuclear bomb, and this might not even be his strongest form. Gulp. A difficult swallow echoed in the silent room. Baron Strucker's throat bobbed up and down, a drop of cold sweat trickling down his temple. At this moment, he could no longer maintain his usual composure. His eyes reflected the crimson giant in the video, his heart trembling uncontrollably. What kind of monster have I created? Hydra was doomed. At this moment, all Hydra members with a certain political acumen almost simultaneously had the same thought. Initiate the ultimate plan, attack immediately. Just then, a sudden command rang in Strucker's ears. He froze, then looked back. General Willie Davidson, who had been standing quietly behind him, was now holding a satellite phone and softly issuing some orders. Davidson, what are you doing? Strucker demanded. However, the trusted general, who had always been obedient to him, completely ignored his question, turned directly, and strode out of the command room. Stop right there. Strucker shouted again, sharply. This time, Davidson stopped. He slowly turned, looking at Strucker with cold eyes, devoid of any past deference. Just then, several crisp gunshots rang out from outside the room. Following closely, more than a dozen burly Hydra cyborgs pushed open the door, their metallic footsteps clanking. Their dark gun muzzles, however, were all pointed at the Hydra members present, surrounding them completely. The sudden change in the situation made the faces of the Hydra officers present subtly change. Strucker's face abruptly changed, veins bulging, as he stared menacingly at the middle-aged white man below, asking word by word, Davidson, do you know what you're doing? Baron, the operation failed. Davidson's tone was calm, directly stating his purpose. I am now taking full control of the battlefield. Absurd. Strucker roared, are you trying to rebel? But before he finished speaking, a Hydra officer, whose status was second only to the two, suddenly asked, impossible, how can you command the cyborgs? The highest authority should be in the Baron's hands, you guys. As his question was still being shouted, a familiar figure appeared before everyone. Of course, it's because of Dr. Zola's support. Everyone turned their heads in unison. Alexander Pierce. Baron Strucker stared intently at the man at the door, now fully understanding what had happened. What are you doing here? What did that mean just now? Where is Zola? He needs to speak to me personally. Was it that dead man Zola causing trouble behind the scenes? What exactly did he want to do? Baron, the doctor said long ago that the target should be dealt with by thunderous means. Pierce looked contemptuously at the Hydra leader. Facts have proven that his decision was entirely correct. Your arrogance and short-sightedness have led to an irreversible situation. Dr. Zola has fully entrusted me with the X-17 matter. I order that from now on, all military actions will be commanded by General Davidson, and anyone who disobeys will be shot on sight. Strucker stared at the other party's obnoxious face, and his furious emotions calmed down instead. He understood that his power was gone. Turning to Davidson, he asked in a deep voice, why betray me? His cyborg's authority had been compromised, he was angry, but helpless. After all, the technology for the cyborgs was personally given to him by Zola. But what he found most unbelievable was Davidson, this subordinate who had followed him for 30 years, practically his right-hand man. He had betrayed him. It was because of this 3-star lieutenant general that he was able to mobilize troops in America, set up various laboratories and research institutes, and gather scientific and technological talent from across the country. But the other party just shook his head, giving a completely opposite answer. I have been Dr. Zola's man from the beginning, so there is no betrayal. Having said that, Davidson no longer bothered with the man whose fate was already sealed, simply instructing, take him away. Joe Z, of course, was unaware of the rebellion happening within Hydra. At this moment, he stood before the ruins of the city district he had destroyed with a single palm, collecting the spoils of this operation. Whoosh! He gently fanned his palm, and an invisible airwave vibrated at high frequency with a special rhythm, instantly pulverizing the gravel and soil on the ground into dust. Joe Z exhaled, and the dust scattered with the wind, revealing 7 or 8 sparking cybernetic bodies beneath. He scanned them with his telekinesis mind power, discovering that while the cube batteries in their chests were damaged, their overall structure remained intact and not completely scrapped. Ha 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 ha. Hydra products are indeed all high-quality goods. Joe Z's telekinesis mind power expanded, constructing a barrier to block surveillance, and the muscles in his chest slightly peristalsis wriggled, a marble-sized miniature metal pistol sliding out from within his body. He gently pressed a button, and the miniature pistol immediately unfolded in his palm, perfectly sized for gripping. He pulled the trigger, and several red light waves shot out. The 2-meter-tall cybernetic bodies on the ground were all miniaturized to the size of a fingernail, and he picked them up one by one, placing them into a small metal box. After doing all this, Josie immediately headed to the next location. In about 10 minutes, he had collected 13 of the most technologically advanced cybernetic bodies, sound and light attack arrays, and 15 armored vehicles crushed into scrap metal. Of course, the most valuable among them was the vibranium chain currently bound to him. This was a complete surprise. Josie had originally planned to visit the African black market sometime later to acquire some vibranium ore. To his knowledge, Wakanda had been exporting vibranium at this stage. In the Black Panther movie, the brother of King T'Chaka of Wakanda had long smuggled vibranium to the outside world. Unexpectedly, he encountered it here ahead of time. Hydra was practically a treasure-delivering boy. These were all of Josie's spoils from this battle. As for the hundreds of modified humans, most were killed by the shockwave. In fact, even if they hadn't been killed by the shockwave. In Josie's observation, these living dead, whose brains and organs had been forcibly modified, mixed with mechanical structures, and whose cells had been injected with an active substance suspected to be a serum variant, did not have much life left. In at most a week, they would completely decay into a puddle of rotten flesh. Just like the test subjects he had seen in the Hydra base. So, he gave each of them an additional miniature ray, turning them into mud and burying them underground, to prevent the American military from dissecting and studying them afterwards. Finally, and most importantly, was to eliminate his biological residue, which included a few fallen hairs. Genetic material must never be leaked. Josie didn't want Hydra or the military to suddenly produce a clone of him one day to fight against him. Such a cliched scenario was absolutely not allowed to happen to him. After doing all this, he prepared to leave. This old district, spanning 400 to 500 meters, was originally a trap battlefield set up by Hydra in the name of the military to round him up. The original residents had already been forcibly evicted or taken away. The power of that palm strike, which annihilated the enemy, was too astonishing, directly leveling a good portion of the district. The commotion was so great that the entire city must have heard it. Even some satellites in space must have captured the anomaly here. He needed to leave here as quickly as possible. Just as Josie put on his battle suit and prepared to shrink his body, a crisis, several times more intense than before, suddenly surged in his heart. He immediately captured the abnormal information flow. Several high-frequency electromagnetic waves, coming from different directions, swept back and forth among the surrounding ruins. His super brain instantly determined that these signals clearly belonged to the waveband model of military reconnaissance radar. At the same time, a dozen infrared pulse spots accurately landed on his body, locking onto him. Radar detection, plus laser guidance. Josie suddenly looked up, his eyes narrowing. He saw 6 or 7 faint specks in the high-altitude clouds, tens of thousands of meters away, breaking through multiple sound barriers, like sharp swords piercing the sky, approaching at extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, they covered a distance of several kilometers. These are supersonic missiles. Every cell in Josie's body was subtly vibrating, warning him that the impending danger was not to be underestimated. Instantly, light information completed its calculations in his mind. He came to a conclusion. The flying speed of these specks had already surpassed Mach 15. They were about 13 kilometers from Detroit, leaving him with a maximum of 2.3 seconds of reaction time. This speed is incredible. It looks like they're still accelerating. Their impact speed will probably exceed Mach 20. These must be America's intercontinental missiles. Hydra is really that ruthless. Aren't they afraid of affecting civilians? Josie's thoughts raced, and he made a decision in an instant. Without the slightest hesitation, his heart throbbed, blood surged rapidly, muscles bulged, bones cracked, and cells burned furiously. Hundreds of tons of force instantly condensed in his legs. Approximately 0.5 seconds later, Josie's figure suddenly shot up from the ground, like a super cannonball blasting into the sky. Boom! A white wave rose from the ground, visible ripples spread, stirring up intense wind pressure. The ground abruptly collapsed the next moment, and a massive force swept outwards from the point of impact, forming a circular crater several meters in diameter. Hundreds of meters above the ground, azure flames sprayed from Josie's back, propelling his massive body upwards at extreme speed, breaking through several times the sound barrier in an instant. By this time, 1.5 seconds had passed since he detected the missiles. Josie had already collided head-on with the 7 massive intercontinental missiles in midair. Clap! His palms slammed together, and a shockwave spread like a tide, covering an airspace of several kilometers in radius, engulfing all the supersonic missiles. Crack, crack, a crisp sound of metal breaking. Immediately following, an earth-shattering explosion erupted in the high sky. Several fireballs, nearly 100 meters in diameter, bloomed one after another, like 7 crimson suns hanging in the sky. A tsunami-like sound wave swept across the sky. Detroit and its suburbs tens of kilometers away all clearly heard the deafening thunder. Oh my God, what is that? Is it an earthquake? It's not an earthquake, it's an explosion. The explosion is in the sky. Could it be a missile attack? On the ground, tens of thousands of residents pushed open their windows, looking up at the sky in horror. In downtown Detroit, at Hart Plaza. About 10 minutes ago, the plaza was still crowded with protesters. Dark figures held various banners and props, confronting the riot police, roaring, provoking, and throwing objects. The police had received orders from their superiors to intercept these demonstrators here, not allowing them to approach the Helen Street Cemetery area, and at the same time, a construction team had been dispatched to completely seal off the entire street. Soon after, several armored vehicles drove into the restricted area, making many police officers increasingly uneasy, secretly guessing that an extremely serious incident must have occurred there. But everyone's attention was no longer on that. After all, this kind of situation had happened before. But just now, intense gunfire and explosions suddenly erupted from the nearby Helen Street district, startling everyone. Some police officers who had served in the military even heard what sounded like tank fire. Immediately after, before they could react, an even more terrifying tremor came from the rear street. A deafening roar, like a meteorite striking the earth, resonated throughout the city. Overwhelming dust and debris rained down from the sky, throwing the protesting crowd in the plaza into chaos, with many people knocked unconscious on the spot. Panic spread. Some were anxious, some were audacious and wanted to go forward to investigate, but a terrifying scene unfolded in the sky. The hurricane impact caused by Josie's palm transmitted down from several kilometers in the sky. A roaring sound 10 times more terrifying than thunder shook the entire city. The air vibrated, dust rolled in the streets, car windows cracked and shattered, as if a doomsday catastrophe had suddenly descended. Immediately following were crimson fireballs exploding in the sky. Large crowds scattered and fled, some screaming, some crying, some instinctively kneeling to pray. Police sirens, broadcasts, and shouts intertwined, creating a doomsday-like cacophony. Chaos ensued. However, in this chaos, no one knew that this city-shaking explosion was merely the aftershock of one person's hands. Perhaps, no one knew either. An unfamiliar person, at some point, had saved them from the brink of death. Several kilometers high, a black line pierced through the clouds. Josie controlled his telekinesis, enveloping the airflow around him, weaving a transparent, wing-shaped air membrane at his sides, gliding rapidly in one direction. Cool icy mist brushed his skin, instantly melting and evaporating from his scorching body. Continuously unleashing 2 powerful moves consumed an astonishing amount of energy. The temperature in his chest was currently more than enough to cook a hot pot. Based on the electromagnetic signal from the cybernetic machine, Hydra's command center should be in this direction. Josie's gaze constantly swept around, discerning Hydra's coordinates. I must be faster, I can't let these guys escape. His psionic energy shifted slightly, and the invisible air membrane supporting him transformed accordingly, with airflow condensing around him into 2 transparent, peregrine falcon-like wings. The air membrane, originally wing-shaped, now completely took on the form of a giant hawk. With a gentle tremor of the transparent wings, Josie's figure became a blur, instantly flying 100 meters away, leaving a white wake in the cloud sea. Fortunately, my previous research into the use of telekinesis yielded some results, otherwise, the bad guys might really have escaped today. Looking at the gradually clearer information points ahead, Josie nodded in satisfaction. However, when he looked down and saw the miniature battle suit cracked in his palm, he sighed helplessly. Just now, to intercept the supersonic missiles, he had almost mobilized all his strength, unleashing the strongest attack he could achieve at this stage. Only then did he successfully detonate them a second before they hit the ground. Otherwise, if the attack had fallen into the city center, it would have caused immense destruction, and the casualties would have been horrific. Although with his speed, even if the missiles had landed, they wouldn't have harmed him in the slightest. But the incident was, after all, caused by him, and he would never want innocent casualties to result from it. The values he had established since childhood made him unwilling to allow such an outcome. The result was, the bionic material of the miniature battle suit could not withstand that immense force, suffering a certain degree of damage, including the cube battery that provided power. Thus, he could only temporarily fly using the less familiar method of telekinesis-generated wings. Fortunately, the spoils of war this time included some vibranium. Melting it into the miniature battle suit after a while would certainly greatly enhance the suit's protective strength. Especially vibranium's kinetic energy absorption properties, which were a perfect match for him. In fact, through today's Hydra Little test, Josie already had a clear understanding of his own strength, peak movie version Hulk plus supersonic flight. If calculated by destructive power level, he could barely be considered a quasi-city buster. On Marvel Earth, this already meant he possessed considerable self-preservation capabilities, no longer needing to worry about being captured for experiments. The 2 months of torment in the Hydra base had indeed left a significant shadow in Joe's heart, making him urgently and ceaselessly strive to arm and improve himself. Only now did he finally have a moment to breathe. After dealing with Detroit, the next step is to control Sokovia, and find the cosmic cube. Accumulate enough life essence to prepare for the next time travel transmigration. His thoughts condensed slightly, and a wisp of information emerged from the depths of his mind. World residence time, 212 days 12 hours 25 minutes 32 seconds, rule adaptability, 10.9%. Smelting material. Miniature particles, red copper fragment, 24.29%. 7 months. If I can complete the smelting of the miniature particles during this period, perhaps I can extend the residence period. Josie mused to himself. But according to calculations, it had been over 3 months since the smelting began in June 1990. The progress had barely reached a quarter. Completing it in the remaining time was basically unlikely, unless some special means were used. The cosmic cube and the arc reactor, currently only these 2 special energy sources are available. What other methods could accelerate energy absorption? Given my current physical strength, perhaps I could try gamma rays. Lost in thought, Josie soared above a manor. His mental power spread out like ripples, and the scene inside instantly appeared in his mind. He couldn't help but frown. They ran so fast. Inside the renovated manor below, only the corpses of 7 or 8 modified humans remained. Based on the residual biological pheromones in the air, just over 10 minutes ago, there were at least 100 people here. To have fled so cleanly in such a short time, this Hydra commander was quite cautious. However, do they really think they can escape? Josie sneered. He pushed the information gathering of Calamity's touch to its limit, and his super brain entered high-frequency computation mode. A faint white mist steamed from behind his head. Soon, countless subtle information fragments floating in the air, sound echoes, electromagnetic traces, gas disturbances, biological molecules, from the manor below, were captured, filtered, calculated, and pieced together by him one by one. Especially the several remaining modified human corpses, from the control chips in their brains, reflected some internal images of the manor, a sense of cyber, soul searching. Just 30 seconds later, a clear image formed in his mind. The evacuation routes of all Hydra members were completely revealed, as clear as the lines on his palm. Josie exhaled a hot breath of steam, ending the extreme calculation. He raised a hand to rub his temples, easing his slightly fatigued brain. He then took out a box from his pocket, enlarged it, and pulled out a large bottle of energy potion, tilting his head back to drink it all, replenishing his physical and mental exhaustion. This kind of calculation, comparable to time remnants. Even with his physique, he wouldn't easily attempt. Just half a minute of deduction was more intense than the consumption of his 2 previous actions in the city, and the burden on his mind was particularly immense. In reality, tracking these escaping Hydra members didn't require such complexity at all. Their escape direction wasn't difficult to determine. The problem was, when these people retreated, they deliberately split into several groups, heading in different directions, clearly to prevent anyone from tracking them. They even pre-arranged false cover routes and used special pheromones to mask their scent, making it impossible for ordinary detection to distinguish true from false. The opponent's caution and calmness exceeded expectations. They even calculated their retreat to this extent, they're guarding against me to the extreme. Too bad, they miscalculated. Wait, something's wrong. As soon as the thought arose in his mind, Josie realized something was amiss. He turned his head to look at the road he came from, then overlooked the hidden manor below his feet, instantly understanding where the problem lay. The manor is more than 70 kilometers from Detroit. Setting up the command center here, under normal circumstances, there's no need to worry about being discovered. But why did Hydra leave in such a hurry? It's as if they knew I would come back. Suddenly, Josie remembered another thing. Was the initial long-range sniper attack their test? Logically, a sniper should kill at close range for accuracy, but that sniper chose to shoot from 1,300 meters away, which was very unusual. Also, the bullets used by the opponent were clearly special high-velocity rounds. It seems, Hydra was trying to determine if he possessed mental abilities at that time. Josie couldn't help but recall the previous battle. Hydra successively brought out various weapons, seemingly intending to capture him alive, but in reality, they were also gradually figuring out his combat characteristics and overall strength. Laser sonic matrix, vibranium chains, electromagnetic cyborgs, supersonic missiles. They tested his speed, defense, strength, and mental perception one by one, and then, with the setup in the manor, determined the depth of his tracking ability. This Hydra's move was a blatant open conspiracy. If he didn't have tracking abilities, they would naturally be safe, but if he really pursued them, scattering and fleeing would not only greatly increase their chances of escape but also indirectly confirm that Josie possessed special tracking methods. For Hydra, no matter the outcome, there was no loss. When Josie's mental power swept over the manor again, a look of understanding flashed in his eyes. Sure enough, what seemed like a perfect retreat route, if observed closely, still revealed some tiny traces. If one were an ability user with a psychic talent, they would likely detect the flaws and thus find Hydra's true route of retreat, then begin tracking. But Josie immediately used image recall and cyber soul searching. He directly deduced the real situation, instead overlooking the trap specifically prepared for him. Hydra, when did they get so smart? Josie's pupils trembled slightly, and a ripple stirred in his heart. Normally, no one would have thought that an enemy could precisely pinpoint their command center from dozens of miles away, as if it were a military radar or a space satellite. But Hydra just did that. And they really hit the jackpot, encountering an opponent like him. Is it Zola? A name flashed in his mind. In his impression, besides that old man who turned himself into an electronic ghost, probably no one could achieve such a deep level of calculation and meticulous arrangement. It's certainly given me a challenge. Josie scrutinized the image in his mind and sneered, since you want to test my abilities, then I'll show you properly. I'm just afraid you'll be too scared to come out then. He had already locked onto all the evacuation routes. At present, Hydra had split into 8 directions to escape, with most people taking helicopters or flying vehicles. After more than 10 minutes of full-speed flight, they would have at least escaped a 100-kilometer radius. Even if Josie had ample physical strength, he could at most catch up to 1/3 of them, that would be his limit. Therefore, he had to filter out the most crucial targets. Otherwise, no matter how much effort he expended, if he only caught up to a group of enhanced humans in the end, it would just be a waste of effort. Josie's expression became slightly serious, and streams of information light flickered in his eyes. The next instant, his psychic wings flapped rapidly, and his figure shot through the clouds like an arrow, heading straight north. The cold wind whistled past his ears, and his gaze carried a hint of amusement. Originally, according to Zola's plan, under normal circumstances, Josie would have used the traces deliberately left by Hydra to determine that the largest number of people were heading north, and that a high-speed flying vehicle was escorting the core personnel team there. Thus, he would choose this, correct, direction. However, the true commander's information stream actually went to the helicopter group in the southwest direction. The flying vehicles there were merely carrying false targets. But that was still a deeper layer of illusion. The people who truly needed to escape, namely Alexander Pierce and General Davidson, were driving a car southeast. Zola, that old guy, is testing my abilities with every step. No matter which route I choose, he can use it to deduce what kind of tracking methods I possess. All of Hydra's people have become pawns in his game against me. Choosing the true north direction would mean he was fooled. Choosing the false southwest would mean he saw through one layer of the scheme, but also exposed more ability data. And choosing the southeast direction, Josie could be sure that Pierce and Davidson would definitely have other contingencies. By the time he caught up, those two might have already vanished. Unfortunately, no matter how much Zola calculates, he can't imagine that Calamity's touch can directly collect the underlying information of the environment, seeing through all of his arrangements. Since that's the case, then I'll just grant his wish. The reason he chose the true north was because when he performed cyber soul searching on the modified humans, he saw a familiar figure, Baron Strucker. What was even more laughable was that the esteemed Baron, Hydra's #1 villain, was actually betrayed by his subordinates and reduced to a decoy tool to attract him. Approximately half an hour later, Josie had flown over 200 kilometers. Following the information stream he captured during his flight, he finally found a flying vehicle resembling a Quinjet in a rocky mountain hollow. The fighter jet was parked on a concrete platform halfway up the mountain, and a semicircular opening, 6 or 7 meters wide, had been carved into the adjacent mountain wall. A concrete staircase snaked downwards from the opening, leading deep into the mountain. Needless to say, it was likely another hidden Hydra stronghold. However, judging by the situation, this stronghold seemed to have encountered some trouble. The flying vehicle, which should have been brand new, was now riddled with bullet holes and dents on its side, with plumes of black smoke constantly rising from its engine, and sparks occasionally visible. On the concrete platform and stairs, a dozen or so modified Hydra soldiers lay scattered, their chests caved in, necks twisted, and all signs of life gone. This stronghold had been ambushed, and quite recently. The attackers' strength was immense. Each modified human possessed powerful combat capabilities, capable of fighting 10 ordinary men, yet they left no trace of resistance, almost instantly wiped out. At this stage, the number of people capable of achieving this, as far as he knew, was very few. Josie's gaze shifted, landing on the side of the aircraft. On the wing, forged from aerospace alloy, a dozen sharp scratches, each an inch deep, were etched, looking particularly menacing and conspicuous. The surrounding concrete ground was also covered with similar signs of damage. But strangely, the injuries on the modified humans lying on the ground were completely different from these scratches. There were no signs of cold weapon slashes. Instead, all of them had their bones shattered by powerful impacts and were crushed to death by brutal force. All of them had their bones shattered by powerful impacts and were crushed to death by brutal force. Interesting, two groups of people. With the airflow around him, Josie glanced at the high-altitude clouds out of the corner of his eye, a few conjectures rising in his mind. It seems I'm in for a lucky day today, all the good things are happening at once. Let's go down and see. With that, his figure flickered, and he swooped down towards the base entrance. Just as Josie flew halfway down the mountain, preparing to land on the helipad, a blue light suddenly shot out from the clouds, striking him in the back. The attack came extremely abruptly, and the timing was incredibly insidious. It was launched precisely at the moment he had slowed down to his maximum and was unable to dodge. Boom! The blue light slammed into his body, and dazzling electric arcs exploded on his surface, directly sending Josie's massive figure flying over 10 meters, crashing heavily onto the concrete platform. Violent electric currents coursed through his body, making his muscles slightly numb. At this moment, the form of that blue beam truly revealed itself. A strangely shaped metal ring was tightly clamped around Josie, continuously releasing brilliant electric arcs. Over 1,000 meters away, the high-altitude clouds were torn apart, and a saucer-shaped aircraft slowly descended. Buzz. The circular engine contracted and rotated, driving the spaceship to hover above the helipad. A gangway extended from the bottom of the cabin, and 7 bald black female warriors, dressed in crimson armor and holding silver-gray spears, descended in sequence, their steps swift and powerful. The leading woman, with black gold armor inlaid on her arm, cast a stern gaze towards the unconscious Zhou Zi. A warrior beside her stepped forward, pointing her spear at Zhou Zi. A translucent wave of light swept over, and then she reported, "Commander Kamari, it has been confirmed, it is indeed the missing vibranium. However, it has already been used. This man's body is very strong, the energy wave cannot scan deeply." As the warrior reported the situation, she gazed at the man on the ground with surprise. This Asian man was incredibly large, far more powerful than even the most elite warriors of the mountain tribes. It seemed he also possessed some kind of flying ability just now. HMPH. Kamari snorted coldly. No matter how powerful he is, wasn't he easily captured by vibranium? The Panther God is the most powerful being, the vibranium she bestows is invincible. She looked down at the unconscious man on the ground, her expression filled with disgust and disdain. These monkeys from the outside world, each one greedy, cunning, and insidious, always coveting the precious vibranium, they truly deserve to die. As King T'Chaka's confidant and comrade in arms, Kamari's political stance had always been highly consistent with his, even more radical and ruthless. In her view, anyone or any force that dared to covet vibranium, no matter who they were, they had to be completely eradicated. Even King T'Chaka's brother Njobu, who caused the vibranium leak this time, was unforgivable. "Noni, Terra, remove the vibranium from him." "Yes, Commander." The female warrior called Noni responded and stepped forward, drawing a gleaming vibranium dagger from her waist, and walked towards Zhou Zi with another female warrior. As for how to remove the vibranium that had already embedded itself in the muscle, for the Wakandan elites protecting the Black Panther King, it was just a routine task. They had received various brutal trainings since childhood, from espionage and infiltration to assassination missions, from special operations to frontal assaults, killing countless enemies with their own hands. Killing enemies, taking prisoners, executing. Every step was incredibly skilled. They were practically experts at dealing with prisoners. Clang. However, the moment the dagger touched Zhou Zi's skin, a terrifying recoil force, suddenly erupted, directly sending the vibranium dagger flying. The giant, who had been lying motionless on the ground, now slowly stood up. Boom. In an instant, a terrifying pressure swept through. The Wakandans felt as if a great mountain had descended from the sky, pressing them to the point of suffocation and unconsciousness, and a vast life aura brushed past, making their entire body's cells tremble incessantly as if electrocuted. The vibranium ring, which should have firmly trapped the target, was actually being forcefully propped open by the giant in front of them. The surging electric arcs, like flowing water, completely entered Zhou Zi's mouth and nose with his breathing. This scene was incredibly bizarre and terrifying. Kamari and Noni struggled to look up, meeting a pair of indifferent black eyes. "It seems you were planning to kill me." The sound of thunder exploded in their ears, shaking their minds, and they could no longer hold their spears, which crashed heavily to the ground. "Can you give me an explanation?" Zhou Zi murmured softly, his voice calm yet bone-chillingly cold. "What did I do wrong? You were going to put me to death without even saying a word." As the last word fell, the vibranium ring on his body completely disintegrated, breaking into countless small parts that clattered to the ground, crisp and pleasant to the ear. How is that possible? We. Facing Zhou Zi's questioning, Kamari's heart was filled with terror. She wanted to explain but couldn't utter a single word. The female commander's mind was in chaos. She could only force herself to stand firm, not allowing herself to kneel in fear, praying that her subordinates in the spaceship could intervene in time. The Black Panther Guard was indeed well trained, and the spaceship crew reacted extremely quickly. Almost simultaneously, they detected the anomaly on the landing platform. Rumble. A strong wind pressure suddenly spread, and the vibranium engine operated at high speed. In the next instant, 4 dark cannon muzzles beneath the spaceship all rotated, and dazzling light rapidly condensed within the cannon chambers. Accompanied by a low roar, a brilliant blue ion stream shot out. The scorching flame stream pierced through the air, carrying the power to destroy everything, and blasted towards Zhou Zi, directly hitting the position of his head. Seeing this situation, a trace of wild joy flashed across Kamari's face. Indeed, Wakanda was the strongest. Even if this guy's physique was strong enough to break free from vibranium restraints, he could never survive against a plasma cannon capable of vaporizing steel. However, the smile on her face lasted less than half a second. Because in the next moment, she discovered with horror that the tall figure in front of her was slowly dissipating in the flames. The plasma cannon shot straight through the air, piercing through an empty spot, and slammed into the mountain behind, blasting a deep pit several meters wide. For a moment, stone fragments flew, and dust billowed. Kamari's expression changed dramatically. She almost immediately realized what had happened. That guy's speed was too fast. He had already dodged the moment the plasma cannon fired, so fast that he left a clear afterimage in the air. Powerful, terrifying, beyond common sense. At this moment, this once high and mighty Wakandan Royal Guard commander, who viewed outsiders as stupid monkeys, could no longer maintain her arrogance and composure. Unprecedented fear and shock assailed her. Her heart pounded wildly, almost bursting from her chest, and cold sweat dripped down her forehead. Only then did they realize. They seemed to have truly provoked a massive problem. But Kamari and the others were, after all, Wakanda's most elite commanders. Even though they were extremely terrified, they still forcibly steadied their minds. The moment Zhou Zi's figure disappeared, she and the 6 female warriors behind her simultaneously slapped their chests. Suddenly, a translucent blue light membrane appeared on the bodies of the 7, shimmering like an energy shield, akin to a defensive force field from a sci-fi movie. Immediately after, Kamari bent down and picked up her dropped vibranium spear. Clang! The butt of the spear slammed heavily into the ground, and another semicircular energy cover, light shield, spread from the spear tip, blocking all the flying stone fragments and hot airflow. After completing all this, she quickly shouted, "Everyone, gather around me. Stack shield defenses, full speed retreat." Then, she ordered the warriors inside the spaceship. "Unil. All cannons aim at me. If you detect any anomaly, fire immediately, don't hesitate." Her words were cut short. In midair, a red beam of light suddenly shot out, heavily impacting the energy shield of the vibranium aircraft. Buzz. The translucent blue shield vibrated violently, and ripples like water waves spread, causing the spaceship to sway from side to side, making it impossible to aim. What made Kamari's heart tighten even more was that the engine at the tail of the spaceship was flickering, showing signs of dying out. The Wakandans immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. Sure enough, 3 more red beams of light fell consecutively. Under the interference of the miniaturizing rays, the vibranium shield could no longer maintain stability. Until the 5th ray shot out. Bang! The blue light shield completely shattered, like a popped bubble, transforming into fragmented light and dissipating into the air. Zhou Zi's offensive was fierce, giving the enemy no chance. Bang! A muffled sound echoed in the sky, and a metal container, dozens of meters long and wide, crashed down from high altitude, pressing directly towards the vibranium spaceship. The massive shadow instantly obscured the sunlight, like a magic treasure suppressing demons in myths, and the descending spaceship was forcefully collected within it. The moment the bottom cover closed, a dazzling white light flashed across the sky. No one saw what happened. When the light dissipated, the spaceship and the huge container had already vanished without a trace. In its place was a domineering figure standing proudly in the sky. Zhou Zi's eyelids were lowered, casting a gaze of indifferent majesty, like a god delivering judgment. Surrender, or death. A thunderous voice exploded in the minds of Kamali and the others. The 7 people below, who had been standing ready, felt their limbs go numb, and their knees instantly buckled, causing them to fall forward onto their knees. The weapons they had just raised once again slipped from their hands and fell to the ground, and the semicircular shields activated by their spears also vibrated violently, almost collapsing. Victory and defeat were already clear. In this brief confrontation, Wakanda was completely defeated. Facing Josie's suppression, they had almost no room to resist. Even with Wakanda's vibranium technology, decades ahead of its time, it became vulnerable under the dual assault of the miniaturization ray and mental deterrence. However, what was surprising was this. In the face of an unparalleled and despair-inducing power, even though their bodies trembled uncontrollably, the light of defiance in these women's eyes still did not extinguish. On the platform, Kamali propped herself up with her spear, looking up at the man in the sky who resembled a deity. Her bloodshot eyes were filled with fanatical devotion to an unknown faith, and she shrieked, "The warriors of the leopard god will never fear death. You will not make us submit." Seemingly encouraged by their leader, the other 6 female warriors also struggled to their feet, shouting in agreement. Their voices were hoarse, sounding somewhat tragic. "What the hell is with all this nonsense? Not surrendering? Then just die." Josie's tone was utterly cold. He had originally planned to spare 1 or 2 lives to exchange for a batch of vibranium resources from Black Panther or Wakanda. However, since they were all so eager to die, he would grant their wish. "I was the one attacked first, so why does it seem like I'm the villain?" He snorted coldly in his heart. Moreover, those natives from Wakanda had shown no mercy when attacking him earlier. If he had been slightly weaker, or hadn't discovered the spaceship hidden in the clouds, he would be the one lying on the ground waiting to die now. Although there was indeed some element of entrapment involved. Ultimately, they had chosen the wrong opponent. Boom. The air exploded, and Josie crashed down like a meteor. Dense cracks spread across the concrete platform, and the fierce wind wrapped around him was comparable to air cannons, making Wakanda's vibranium shield shake uncontrollably. "Be careful. Retreat quickly." Kamali and the others gripped their vibranium spears tightly, their palms numb and skin cracking from the shock, as they desperately resisted the terrifying impact. They stared intently at the enemy outside the shield, his devil-like form, and the horrifying sight of vibranium chains that couldn't bind him, but were instead absorbed into his flesh. The warning bells in their hearts rang wildly, all indicating one fact. Their death was at hand. A hint of regret flashed in the hearts of a few female warriors, thinking how good it would have been if they hadn't attacked him just now. They didn't want to die. Unfortunately, there was no turning back. From the moment they decided to attack Josie, their fate was sealed. Josie didn't want to waste time on these people. As soon as he landed, he took a big stride, his mountain-like body appearing in front of the semicircular shield as if teleporting. He clasped his hands together like a hammer, raised them high above his head, and then brought them down heavily. Dong! Jung! The moment the sonic boom fist, tearing through the air, touched the vibranium shield, the light blue membrane burst apart without resistance, like a pricked soap bubble. The power of extreme overload, superimposed with Josie's high-frequency mental resonance. Wakanda's defense system, which had not yet developed anti-shock technology at this stage, simply could not withstand this supersonic punch with hundreds of tons of impact force. White ripples of chi spread out, and Kamali and the others were suddenly flung into the air. Tap! Tap! Footsteps echoed in her ears. Kamali, still tumbling haphazardly in midair, felt a shadow flash before her eyes, and a large, fan-like palm swept down with a whoosh. Her proud vibranium armor's light membrane flickered for less than a second before it shattered with a bang under a surging, vibrating force. It shattered with a bang. PFF'd. Like a hammer hitting rotten wood, accompanied by a series of bone-shattering sounds, Kamali spun and flew towards the cliff face. Her entire body embedded directly into the rock wall, blood gushing from her nose and mouth as if it were free, clearly not going to survive. His footsteps did not falter. This time, the targets were the 2 women who had tried to dissect him, Noni and Tara. Josie raised his hand and grabbed, extending both arms simultaneously, his palms whistling. He gripped their heads like he was holding chicks, his palms' mental power vibrating at high speed, instantly breaking through their surface shields, then gently twisted his wrists. Crack, crack. Their fragile neck bones were twisted 180 degrees, their fate was imaginable. 3 fell to the ground, life and death instantly decided. After dealing with 3 people in one go, the remaining 4, who had been blown away by the wind pressure, had just landed from midair. They had just witnessed the tragic state of their companions firsthand. At this moment, these individuals' faces were twisted in rage, their eyes bloodshot, glaring at Zhou Zi with venomous hatred, wishing they could tear him to shreds. HMPH. Zhou Zi's expression was cold, ignoring their gazes. These women of Wakanda, each of them likely had no less blood on their hands than he did. Since the two world wars, vibranium had appeared outside Wakanda more than once in the past century. Just in the intelligence he had gathered about vibranium. Black markets on the African coast, EU Materials Research Institutes, Tokyo Superconducting Laboratories, Kiev Academy of Sciences, U.S. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, many places had seen samples suspected to be vibranium ore. But without exception, the humans involved, including jewelers, scientists, explorers, government officials, and so on. Anyone unwilling to trade with Wakanda's covert agents, or who attempted to explore and research vibranium, all died unexpectedly soon after. Either in car accidents, falls from buildings, or disappearances. Or so-called scientific research accidents. To say that, Dora Milaje, Wakanda Royal Guard, wasn't behind this. He wouldn't believe it even if he were beaten to death. To ensure the nation's strategic interests, how could there be no bloody slaughter? Zhou Zi flicked his toe, picking up a vibranium spear. His sinewy, dragon-like arms stretched, and immense power surged along the metal shaft, splitting the air in front of him, sweeping across at high speed. If this blow landed on a person, it would definitely be a magical trick of turning one into two, and two into four. Seeing their death approaching, the four closed their eyes in despair. Stop! A furious roar suddenly erupted. At the critical moment, with a whoosh, a dark figure shot out from the Hydra base's passage. He blocked in front of them before the spear could fall. Jung! A crisp metallic clash exploded. The shadow was shaken back several meters, his feet dragging deep scratches on the ground. And the four people were once again flung several meters by the impact, falling awkwardly to the ground again, but miraculously saving their lives. At the same time, this explosive roar also jolted their minds. That voice, it's King Black Panther. The several people looked up, seeing a figure in a pitch-black tight battle suit, with sharp claw blades embedded in the ground. The person who arrived was none other than the King of Wakanda, Black Panther T'Chaka. Who are you, and why are you attacking us? A low growl came from beneath the mask, containing suppressed fury. He had only left for less than 10 minutes. He had intended to wipe out this enemy's stronghold and recover the stolen vibranium ore. He was fighting a guy suspected to be a super soldier, but unexpectedly, an alarm suddenly blared in his battle suit, warning that the guard team was under attack by a powerful enemy, forcing him to return quickly. But when he arrived, the tragic sight almost made him lose his mind. His most trusted leader, Kamali, and two other elite members were brutally killed on the spot. The other four were also on the verge of death, nearly dying right before him. This was not just a provocation to Wakanda, but the ultimate humiliation to him, Black Panther. On the battlefield, Zhou Zi held the spear with one hand. Looking at the Black Panther who had suddenly rushed out, he couldn't be bothered to offer any explanation in response to the other party's question. Attack! A cruel arc curved at the corner of his mouth, and the grip on the spear tightened slightly, as he swung it directly at Black Panther T'Chaka. Since he was accused of attacking, he would attack to the end. The best way to deal with these arrogant individuals who thought they were superior was to beat them into submission. HMPH. T'Chaka roared, purple energy erupting from his suit, blasting towards Zhou Zi. The next instant, the energy shield of the suit and the high-frequency psychokinesis on the spear collided with a bang. Boom! A distorted impact wave spread wildly, centered on the two. The Hydra base's helipad was instantly pitted with craters, and fragments of earth and stone flew everywhere. T'Chaka had just blocked one attack and hadn't even had time to catch his breath when the oppressive feeling swept over him again, even more ferocious than before. At this moment, he was in a state where his old strength was depleted and new strength had not yet emerged. He was utterly powerless to block Zhou Zi's casual strike. Although the Black Panther suit could negate some kinetic energy, it was limited to that. Even the strongest vibranium technology had its limits, and the high-frequency psychokinesis attached to the spear's surface had greatly weakened the suit's energy absorption effect. Thud! PFF'd. There was no surprise. The so-called divine warrior descending from the heavens was non-existent in the face of absolute power. Wakanda's strongest warrior, a king whose physical prowess rivaled a super soldier, the Black Panther, was sent flying like an insect, smashing directly into the cliff face. Like the guard captain before him, he was deeply embedded in the cliff. His head lolled to the side, completely unconscious. PFF'd. Josie plunged the vibranium spear into the ground, looking around the concrete helipad with a satisfied expression. Today's harvest was truly abundant. Hydra wasn't enough. These high-tech natives from Wakanda also appeared to offer treasures. Josie glanced at the remaining Black Panther female guards but did not make a move. After a brief thought, he walked up to the unconscious Black Panther and directly stripped off the vibranium suit. Stop. Seeing this, the four women roared, about to get up and stop this disrespectful act towards their king. Josie suddenly turned his head, sweeping his gaze with just one look. The few women immediately collapsed to the ground, bones cracking, large mouthfuls of blood spewing from their mouths. Psychokinetic pressure, a very subtle little trick. By controlling gas molecules with minimal psychokinesis, combined with the computational power of a supercomputer brain, it created a triple combined effect of microelectrostatic adsorption, boundary layer control, and phase prediction. This perfectly negated every bit of force in the enemy's movements. Then, using mental power, he manipulated his own solidified life magnetic field to directly intimidate the opponent at the cellular level, forming a life pressure akin to a genetic predator. This resulted in a dual physical and mental strike. Without the obstruction of the vibranium fabric's energy membrane, once enveloped by psychokinetic pressure, it was like sinking into a quagmire, completely unable to exert force. Even a strong super soldier would find it difficult to break free in a short time. In fact, as long as Josie's brain's computational power was strong enough and his microscopic control deep enough. Even if his psychokinesis could only control a few kilograms of matter, he could create several tons, or even tens of tons, of reverse resistance on the opponent's body surface. With just a thought or a glance, he could make anyone completely prostrate. The only side effect was that the brain's computational power was consumed quickly and could not be maintained for a long time. But it was more than enough to deal with these Black Panther guards. Under the hateful and fearful gaze of the few, Josie collected the Black Panther suit, the vibranium spear, and all other vibranium items one by one. Then, he took out 4 electromagnetic shielding hibernation pods from his Y. These were the same devices that had been used to store the Winter Soldier. He first injected the Black Panther with an extra-large dose of sedative to prevent him from waking up too quickly. Then he went to the remaining 4 people, casually knocked out 3 of them, and also injected them with the sedative. Finally, he loaded them all into the hibernation pods, shrunk them, and placed them into a small iron box. At this point, the Wakanda spoils of war were collected. Of course, Josie used psychokinesis to obscure the images related to PIM technology, creating a mosaic-like visual interference. No one could see how he made those things disappear. On the scene, the only remaining Wakanda female warrior felt a momentary blur before her eyes. King Black Panther and the other 3 were all gone. The fear in her gaze towards Josie finally overwhelmed her hatred, and she cried out, "What did you do? Where did your Highness T'Chaka and the others go?" In her eyes, this man was like a demon. Did he really swallow the king whole? In this era, Ant-Man technology and PIM particles were still SHIELD's top secret, and Wakanda could not possibly comprehend such technology. Josie did not respond to her questioning. Instead, he calmly looked at the Hydra base passage nearby and said lightly, "Are you going to come out yourself, or should I drag you out?" 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. A full 10 seconds passed, and the depths of the passage remained silent, as if he were talking to himself. HMPH, if you won't drink a toast, then prepare for the feast. Before he finished speaking, only a distorted afterimage remained in his original spot. The real Josie tore through the air, crashing into the depths of the passage. Clang! The sound of metal vibrating exploded in the darkness. A crimson figure leapt out, rolled several times in the air, and landed steadily. This was a man built like an iron tower, nearly 2 meters tall, with broad shoulders and a thick back. A battle suit interwoven with deep red and silver gold tightly wrapped his body, outlining steel-cast muscle lines. His left hand held a red star circular shield made of vibranium, and his right hand clutched a silver-gray greatsword. A cold light shone from the five-pointed star on his chest, and golden emblems of a hammer and sickle were engraved on his arms. In the man's steel blade-like blue-gray eyes, there was a unique military resolve and cold arrogance. At this moment, an unprecedented solemnity appeared on his handsome and stern face. His gaze was firmly fixed on Zhou Zi, who had walked out of the passage, and on the other Baron Strucker that Zhou Zi was carrying, his target to protect this time. What, as a super soldier meant to rival Captain America, do you not even have the courage to fight me? Zhou Zi scrutinized the Winter Guard, a hint of playfulness in his tone. It's just a shame about the vibranium shield and greatsword. Such good weapons, I'm afraid they'll follow the wrong person from now on. Listening to the taunt in the other's words, the Winter Guard frowned slightly but showed no signs of anger or loss of control. He held his sword and shield, shifting his stance slightly. He intently stared at this unusually terrifying being. Indeed, such a distinct and unique outfit. This was the Soviet-made super soldier, the famous Winter Guard, Alexei Shostakov. Anyone who had spent a few days in U.S. intelligence circles had likely heard of this Soviet captain, whose name was known but whose face was unseen. However, his image was completely different from that in the movies. In Zhou Zi's psychokinetic perception, this super soldier's mental state was extremely stable, even cold and hard, like the tens of thousands of years of permafrost in Siberia. The so-called belligerent, vain, mentally unstable hero complex. Not a single trace of these could be felt on this Winter Guard warrior. The ideational messages captured by the touch of calamity from him were basically all positive energy, resilience, upliftment, unyielding spirit, and fervor. The occasional negative thoughts were merely complaints about his superiors or worries about the domestic situation. Oh, there's also confusion about the future, trying to save a declining motherland, but not knowing where to start. Frustration at his inability to change the current situation. Observing this, Zhou Zi's expression changed slightly, and the hostility he felt towards the Winter Guard for his previous offense dissipated somewhat. This was a true soldier. A sincere patriot. However, he seemed a bit lost. Perhaps, he needed a little, friendly help. Coincidentally, as an excellent young man who also grew up under the red flag, Zhou Zi had always upheld the fine virtue of helping others. Let me inherit the spirit of Comrade Lei Feng. Suddenly, Zhou Zi's eyes shifted, and a bold idea emerged. The upcoming 1991 Sokovia in Eastern Europe, Baron Strucker's Hydra, and Umbrella Corporation with the Winter Guard. If we add the soon-to-be-born Captain America and S.H.I.E.L.D. under Howard's control. This is simply a heaven-sent opportunity. His supercomputer brain unconsciously started running, deducing possible development routes. The deeper Zhou Zi's thoughts went, the more feasible the plan seemed. Originally, due to the combat state, his emotional module, which had been forcibly suppressed by his iron will and supercomputer brain, even subtly cheered up. A rare smile appeared on his face, and his gaze towards the Winter Guard became increasingly satisfied. This guy really came at the right time, but I wonder if he's willing to cooperate. 10 meters away, Alexei, who had been constantly watching Zhou Zi, felt a sudden shiver when he saw the strange look and eerie smile, instinctively raising his shield and retreating. Forget it, it's better to capture him first. Otherwise, a few words won't be enough to convince him. After making the decision, Zhou Zi didn't delay for a moment. His telekinesis swept over, instantly confirming the Winter Guard's power limit. Alexei only felt a gust of wind brush his face, and the massive figure opposite him had already vanished from his sight, dissipating like dust swept up by the wind. By the time he realized something was wrong, a shadow abruptly rose beside him. In his horror, his peripheral vision caught a glimpse of a giant palm descending from the void realm, slowly yet quickly, resting steadily on his arm. Upon contact, Alexei immediately sensed the abnormality. He clearly felt his body being wrapped in layers of an invisible force, as if bound tightly by thousands of pounds of pressure. Just the act of turning around required an astonishing amount of effort. This strange sensation made him involuntarily recall a past experience. That was during a mission to the deep Pacific Ocean to carry out sabotage, where he was forced to dive hundreds of meters underwater due to leaked intelligence. The terrifying pressure that came from all directions, it was almost identical to what he felt now. At this moment, Alexei truly realized how immense was the gap between him, a super soldier, and the monster before his eyes. This mission, I'm afraid, is going to fail. Although he realized his impending fate, the stubbornness of a soldier still made him grit his teeth and swing his vibranium round shield, smashing it fiercely towards Josie's abdomen. As the Winter Guard, he would not fear any enemy in the slightest. Regrettably, under the restraint of the telekinetic pressure, he couldn't unleash even 20% of his strength. The attack hadn't fully landed. Josie delivered a powerful, incredibly swift hand chop, the accompanying telekinesis precisely hitting a vital point. The next moment, Alexei's vision went black, his body completely lost strength, and he slowly slumped to the ground, falling into a long slumber. The subsequent process was no different from how Black Panther was handled. First, an injection of super hibernation fluid, then placed into an electromagnetic hibernation pod, and finally stored in a small iron box. The entire process was incredibly smooth, done in one go. Of course, there was also Baron Strucker, captured from the Winter Guard. Josie had no intention of reminiscing with an enemy. His vibranium spear flashed, directly decapitating him. The body was cut into dozens of pieces and casually tossed into the mountain hollow. Perhaps tonight, this Hydra leader, who had dominated the shadow world for half a century, would become a lump of beast feces in some beast's stomach. Only today did his revenge truly come to a preliminary close. It was a pity that killing his enemy didn't bring any spiritual sublimation or miracles like a surge in telekinesis, which was somewhat disappointing. This is the downside of the sci-fi transcendent universe. It's not as romantic as Xuanwan cultivation. Josie turned around, looking at the last person. It was time to deal with the Wakanda matter. Looking down at the slightly immature female guard, he removed the telekinetic pressure he had placed on her and spoke indifferently. Name. Facing his simple question, the woman, or rather, girl, lying prostrate on the ground, remained motionless. Okoye's emotions were on the verge of collapse at this moment. The tragic state of His Majesty Black Panther under the terrifying creature's hands kept replaying in her mind. Wakanda's strongest warrior was so weak, so laughable. That scene violently shattered her beliefs, completely obliterating her faith in, king above all, Wakanda invincible. Weak, backward, foolish, greedy. These words, in past training classes, were used by instructors to describe the outside world. Dora Milaje's lessons often showed documentaries and materials from the outside, depicting the chaos and primitiveness of external societies. While Wakanda, protected by the Panther God and the King, was hailed as a symbol of civilization and advancement. But all of this was completely overturned today. The man who descended from the sky wielded divine power. He effortlessly collected the vibranium spaceship, crushed His Majesty Black Panther with a casual strike, and rendered all four of them completely immobile with just a glance. They actually tried to ambush him. How ridiculous. How overconfident. Looking at the motionless captive at his feet, and the chaotic thoughts emanating from her. Josie's eyelids twitched, and he immediately understood something. This is a broken Dao heart, a collapsed faith. Never mind, I'll just check myself. He immediately stopped asking questions, directly condensed the touch of calamity, supplemented by mental telekinesis, and began to gather the information he needed in a near mind-reading manner. Now, his control over his abilities, while not perfect, was certainly at an advanced level. Such small tricks of hypnosis and mind-reading were merely child's play. He could even somewhat see through soldiers with steel-like wills like the Winter Guard. What's more, the target was an ordinary person whose faith was on the verge of collapse and who had no mental defenses whatsoever, so there was no consumption involved. Approximately 5 minutes later, Josie slowly withdrew his power. From this girl named Okoye, he had acquired almost complete intelligence on Wakanda, even some top-secret information was clear to him. For example, Wakanda's geographical location, vulnerabilities in its defense barrier, vibranium ore storage points, and underground smuggling routes. However, Josie was actually most concerned with only two things. First, how much vibranium did Wakanda actually possess? And how much could they offer to redeem their king? Or would they choose to go to war with him directly? Second, why did Black Panther and the others appear here? Why did they happen to stumble into his operation of tracking Hydra? The results of his investigation were as he expected. Behind this, there was still Zola's shadow. First, regarding the quantity of vibranium. The vibranium meteorite that fell to Earth had a very considerable total reserve, conservatively estimated at around 20,000 tons. However, Wakanda's upper nobility, which is the elder council of the 5 major tribes, was very resistant to the outflow of vibranium. Except for symbolic diplomatic gifts or scientific research cooperation, any action leading to the leakage of vibranium would be thoroughly investigated until all lost items were recovered. Recorded data showed that, except for World War II, when the Black Panther King gifted less than 6 kilograms of ore samples to the United States to hide Wakanda and avoid being drawn into the war, there were only a few other records of vibranium outflow. In 1953, 3.2 kilograms of vibranium artifacts were gifted to the Soviet Union. In 1967, 2.8 kilograms of vibranium artifacts were gifted to China. In 1980, geological fragments leaked due to an earthquake were obtained by European and American explorers and taken back for research, then recovered by the Claws of War, Wakanda's spy organization. In June 1990, the largest vibranium theft in Wakanda's history occurred. Black Panther's brother Njidaka teamed up with black market merchant Ulysses Claw, exploiting a defense loophole in a border tribe, to attack and steal over 3 tons of raw vibranium ore and weapons. Therefore, the king personally led a team to track and recover the vibranium. What's even more ridiculous is that Wakanda's so-called recovery operation was completely under Hydra's control and calculation from beginning to end. According to Okoye's memory, the theft in early June had no progress in over 3 months of searching. But then, the day before yesterday, Wakanda's spy embedded in the CIA accidentally obtained a piece of intelligence. The U.S. military spent $1 billion to purchase a batch of special materials, planning to transport them to a secret base today. And then, this morning, or rather, 4 hours ago, Wakanda's technical satellite detected trace vibranium radiation in this mountain range. So, the king immediately rushed over with his guards to stake out the area, planning to wait for the rabbit and retrieve their sacred object. The result was that they didn't encounter the vibranium sacred object. Instead, they first encountered Baron Strucker and a group of Hydra-modified humans escorting him. Before Black Panther could even deal with the Hydra members, the Winter Guard rushed out, killed the modified soldier Poe, and prepared to take Strucker away. At this time, Wakanda's king made his move. Because the shield and greatsword in the Winter Guard's hands were clearly vibranium weapons, which was obviously the vibranium radiation they detected. The two sides chased and fled, entering the underground base below. Then Zhou Zi, clad in vibranium chains, appeared and collided head-on with the spaceship outside. Next, was the scene of Kamari's audacious attack. These, civilized people, of Wakanda, who prided themselves on being superior, were actually being played like pawns by Zola, yet they never even saw their enemy's face. In the end, Zhou Zi was wrongly blamed and formed a deadly enmity with this super tribe for no reason. Are you making a movie here? Coincidences everywhere. Divine light burst from Zhou Zi's eyes, and he felt both angry and amused. After all the twisting and turning, I still got played. He could almost imagine Zola's deadpan face hiding in some dark corner, analyzing him with today's data. This electronic old geezer is indeed not easy to deal with. Forget it, I don't care anymore. Zhou Zi shook his head, clearing his mind of frustration. Anyway, I have Howard now. I'll just drop a hint and let those two bite each other. Actually, if I look at it from another perspective, I should somewhat thank Zola. If that deadpan face hadn't lured Wakanda, causing the Red Guard to be tied up by Black Panther, and also prematurely blown up the escape tunnel beneath the base, Strucker might have really slipped away this time. Zola probably didn't expect that Baron Strucker had a trick up his sleeve, arranging the Red Guard at the base. Originally, this operation to encircle and annihilate Zhou Zi was led by the American branch, with Strucker merely an observer. Unfortunately, our Baron Strucker was not content. He secretly contacted Drakov, borrowed the Red Guard, and planned to stage a Mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the Oriole behind it scenario. As a result, Zola changed his mind at the last minute. He falsely claimed that his matrix was severely damaged due to calculations involving Umbrella, and he needed the vibranium ore in Strucker's possession, exchanging it for command of the operation against Josie. Strucker was almost driven mad by Josie's actions and agreed without much thought. As a result, he was completely swindled by the electronic deadpan face. Of course, whether the appearance of the Red Guard was a coincidence or deliberately orchestrated, Josie did not know. For now, he would secure the benefits first. As for the enmity between Wakanda and the Red Room, he didn't care about it at all. If these guys dared to show their faces, he would crush them all. His attention returned to the vibranium. According to Okoye's understanding, if the price to redeem Black Panther was too high, the elders of the 5 tribes would rather choose a new king than allow vibranium to flow out. After all, there were many who coveted the throne. This is a bit tricky. I thought I could extort more vibranium by using Black Panther. Looking at the current situation, the king's value is not even as good as a smuggler's. Josie sighed helplessly, then thought of the 3 tons of raw ore in Ulysses Klau's possession. At a market price of $2,000 per gram, that was a staggering $6 billion in wealth. Ulysses should have been controlled by Hydra long ago, otherwise Zola wouldn't have been able to mask the vibranium's radiation fluctuations. Sigh, I wonder where those 3 tons of raw ore are hidden. After sorting through the intelligence, Josie looked at Okoye again. He hadn't expected that this famous female general of future Wakanda would already be showing her prowess at this time, entering the King's Guard at only 15 years old, becoming one of Black Panther's personal guards. Josie glanced at the girl at his feet and spoke to himself. If you want to redeem your king and companions, go back and tell your elders to exchange them for 500 tons of raw vibranium ore. You have 2 months. After that, the offer expires. Although he said this, he knew in his heart that Wakanda would most likely not agree. By then, they would surely gather more tribal warriors to come and crusade against him, an inferior human, from the outside world. No matter the outcome, he wouldn't suffer a loss. Firstly, your people made the first move, and I retaliated appropriately, which is reasonable and fair. Moreover, I did not kill them all, instead, I showed goodwill. I am willing to use vibranium as a diplomatic medium to turn hostility into friendship. But if you remain stubborn and ungrateful, then such a treasure as vibranium should naturally belong to the virtuous. After speaking, he ignored the other party and walked down the base stairs. There was still a batch of vibranium and Hydra data here. Since he had gone to all this trouble to come, he naturally couldn't return empty-handed. Umbrella was in a period of vigorous development and needed a large amount of nourishment. With the miniaturized pistol in hand, Josie didn't bother to differentiate. View. 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 Shot after shot, everything he could see was packed up and taken away, completely emptying the huge base. In the end, apart from a large amount of cybernetic modification data, he only obtained a mere 200 kilograms of vibranium, none of which was raw ore, which greatly displeased Josie. After all, this operation exposed many of his trump cards, and even the miniaturization technology was likely detected. At the same time, he also felt that he had indeed underestimated Hydra and made the mistake of relying on past experience. In the movies, this organization seemed to be beaten like dogs by the Avengers every time, nothing more than a jumping clown used for gaining experience in a game. But that was when facing a group of cheaters with protagonist halos. In reality, Hydra had deep foundations and numerous talents, otherwise, it would not have developed to its current scale. I was indeed careless this time. Schemes and tricks really aren't for me. Honestly improving my strength, that is the true path. The psionic wings gently vibrated, parting the clouds and waves. Josie's figure streaked across the sky like a gust of wind, instantly crossing 1,000 meters, and sped straight towards Detroit. The battle this morning seemed fierce and complex, filled with various schemes and calculations between the two sides. But in terms of actual combat, from the start to the end, it was only a little over an hour, with most of that time wasted on traveling. The actual fighting lasted only a few minutes. Crushing in an instant, harvesting in one strike. Now, only the situation on Shield's side remained unclear. Half an hour ago, he had just left Hydra's command manor when he received a report from Lena. After dealing with the assassination squad, she immediately rushed to the Ghost Research Institute without stopping. As expected, things were pretty much as he had anticipated. Lena arrived not long after Howard and his team were attacked, and she witnessed the entire process. The battle was quite large-scale and was currently locked in a fierce struggle. Through the live high-altitude broadcast she shared, and the surveillance cameras just placed throughout the factory, Josie could clearly see the entire battlefield situation. It could truly be described as fires raging, smoke billowing. In a 3-story machinery factory spanning an area of less than 4 football fields, both sides had deployed at least 200 combat personnel, engaging in a brutal urban battle. The forces Hydra sent to deal with Howard's team were no less formidable than the lineup they used against him. There were 9 squads of cybernetically enhanced individuals alone. Each squad consisted of 6 modified humans controlled by chips and injected with inferior serum, 1 exceptionally powerful cybernetic robot, and 6 elite Hydra soldiers, simultaneously encircling the Ghost Laboratory from 4 directions. In the sky above, 4 Hydra black fighter jets circled and dived, constantly tying down SHIELD's anti-aircraft turrets and Quinjets. If Howard and his team hadn't managed to barely suppress the cybernetic robots by leveraging their advantageous terrain, led by the Howling Commandos and enhanced individuals like Peggy Carter, SHIELD agents would probably have been slaughtered long ago. However, as Hydra launched a reckless assault, SHIELD's casualties gradually climbed. The tide of battle began to quickly shift. Thanks for watching.